I've had a harder time with this sermon than any I've written in a very, very long time. What do you say, and what do you not say, and how do you say it? And when is there a time that a pastor feels like he must speak? I usually do not, but I read my sermon to Amy yesterday, and I rewrote most of it. I scratched a lot of it, trying to figure out what I feel like I have to say. Thank you for your open pulpit. You challenged us 24 years ago to challenge you socially and intellectually and theologically. And we have tried to honor that challenge, and we have tried to step into this pulpit with respect and with humility, knowing the great responsibility. I hope you hear that today. Our text is from James. James is cut to the chase, where the rubber meets the road. Practical theology. Not many of you should become teachers, brothers and sisters, for you know that we who teach will be judged with greater strictness. For all of us make many mistakes. Any who make no mistakes in speaking is perfect, able to keep the whole body in check with a bridle. If we put bits into the mouths of horses to make them obey us, we guide their whole bodies. Or look at ships. Though they are so large that it takes strong winds to drive them, yet they are guided by a very small rudder wherever the will of the pilot directs. So also the tongue is a small member, yet it boasts of great exploits. How great a forest is set ablaze by a small fire, and the tongue is a fire. The tongue is placed among our members as a world of iniquity. It stains the whole body, sets on fire the cycle of nature, and is itself set on fire by hell. For every species of beast and bird, of reptile and sea creature can be tamed and has been tamed by the human species, but no one can tame the tongue, a restless evil full of deadly poison. With it we bless the Lord and Father, and with it we curse those who are made in the likeness of God. From the same mouth come blessing and cursing. My brothers and sisters, this ought not to be so. Does a spring pour forth from the same opening both fresh and brackish water? Can a fig tree, my brothers and sisters, yield olives, or a grapevine figs? No more can salt water yield fresh. How great a forest is set ablaze by a small fire, and the tongue is a fire. You have heard the ancient story. It was 1972. It was the summer after my graduation from the second grade. And a young Grammy-winning comedian was the opening act for a singer named Arlo Guthrie at the annual Summerfest in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Now, more than 3 decades had passed since Clark Gable first shocked audiences with those infamous words at the end of Gone with the Wind. My mother was there. She told me there was an audible gasp in the audience the night she heard the character Rhett Butler speak such ghastly profanity. Pardon me. Frankly, my dear, I don't give a damn. Yes, a lot had changed since 1939, but apparently the audience at Summerfest was still not ready for George Carlin. When Carlin completed his raunchy piece, The 7 Words You Cannot Say on Television, Lieutenant Andrew Busalacci of the Milwaukee Police Department was there to order Carlin arrested. The foul-mouthed comedian was arraigned on charges of disorderly conduct. Apparently, Carlin got the last laugh, however. A Milwaukee reporter named J.R. Radcliffe says, after the 7 words that you can't say on television were said in court, a smiling judge dismissed the charges. Now, I read this incident about Carlin online. I dug up a 2021 article that was leading up to that year's Summerfest. which was to be headlined by comedian Dave Chappelle. I can only say that I hope Lieutenant Bussolacci has retired by now. Timothy Jay is a Massachusetts professor of psychology who has studied swearing for more than 30 years. What an interesting pastime. An article entitled "Profanity is on the Rise" shares a number of the professor's findings, including these. There are over 70 taboo swear words in the English language, but 10 words account for 80% of all usage. I'm guessing you could name maybe 7 of them. Swearing takes off, he says, between the ages of 3 and 4 and becomes adult-like by 11 or 12. Young folks say they learn from parents, peers, and siblings, not from the mass media. The Fox broadcast network showed the greatest per-hour increase in the use of profanity from 2005 to 2010, increasing 269% in those years. Swearing apparently reduces pain. Jay says it doubles the time that you can hold your hand in a bucket of freezing water if you use a little swearing. Our language is a signal flare of the changing times, of times that have already changed. It may be a sign of the decline of our institutional religion. Those of us who grew up going to Sunday school every week learned a certain decorum of rights and wrongs in public discourse. And it was tied to a moral reckoning. In my house growing up, I could not even say gosh or golly, because speaking even those substitutes for the word God constituted taking the Lord's name in vain. And dang or heck, wow, these were only euphemisms for their only slightly more taboo curse word cousins. They were totally off limits in my house. And I cannot say I'm sorry for that part of my upbringing. A little more Puritanism in our culture probably wouldn't hurt any of us today. Change in culture, change in religion. The profanity may also be evidence of a decline in reading, a decreased exposure to good literature's more creative and descriptive vocabulary. There's some laziness involved. If you don't have a richer vocabulary or can't think of a better word, just throw in a cuss word. Everything seems to be fine. There is no doubting the proliferation of profanity in our culture since Clark Gable first pierced the air in 1939 with one simple expletive. For those raised in my generation and later, it seldom even raises an eyebrow. A growing number of American speakers hardly make a distinction into 4-letter words and all the rest. Though I continue to be a little surprised at the casual way some folks will offer up a string of F-bomb-laced vulgarity in even the most refined and public of places. It may sound as if the tongues of many American speakers have, in fact, been set on fire by hell, as James says it. We can offer our critique and concern about potty-mouthed America these days. We would not be wrong to do so. But cussing like a sailor was the very least of James's concern. Now, you may not be able to get away with talking like George Carlin in front of your mother, but the honest truth is that the 7 words you cannot say on television never really brought any harm to anyone. There is a lot of language in our culture, however, a lot of words that do not qualify as profanity, that bear much more of a curse. The root of the problem, as it always has been, is hard hearts, closed minds, narrow vision. But what is relatively new is that all our malice is now magnified by a culture spiraling out of control with social media. The tongue is a fire, and that fire can be spread across the globe now at the speed of light. From the left to the right, from the extremes to some of the very nicest people I know. The worst of stereotypes, unfounded accusations, outright lies, lifelike images generated by artificial intelligence and shared for ill will, the very craziest of conspiracy theories take root and spread like wildfire. As that fire grows, a dangerous False credibility attaches itself to the lies. It must be true, as one post claimed. I seen it on Facebook. The French writer Voltaire noted a truth that with the ease of social media is more true and more dangerous than it ever has been. Anyone who can make you believe absurdities can make you commit atrocities. The tongue is a restless evil, full of deadly poison. Cloaked behind either internet anonymity or just encouraged by the impersonal distance of cyber communication, people seem emboldened to say things online they would never say in person. This week, I read on a post on the platform called Threads these words: "One of the hardest parts of the last few years is watching many of the people I looked up to as kids, coaches, teachers, church leaders, family members, post and share things online that completely contradict the values they taught me. The cruel and degrading things they'll say online are still the things I could never imagine them saying out loud in person. It's led to a really persistent grief, a feeling of loss." I think there is loss. There's a loss of civility and decency in our culture, and it's not from our use of profanity. There's a loss of a collective conscience and respect for one another. There's a loss of honesty and some basic morality. Abraham Joshua Heschel is an often quoted Jewish theologian and philosopher. Heschel survived the Nazi Germany, though many of the members of his family died in concentration camps. As a member of the Jewish community, Heschel understood the power of words to incite hatred, to motivate deadly action. He says, "Speech has power. Words do not fade. What starts out as a sound ends in a deed. How great a forest is set ablaze by a small fire, and the tongue is a fire." In the last 2 weeks, Donald Trump and J.D. Vance have both amplified a conspiracy theory that Haitian immigrants are stealing and eating people's household pets. That internet hoax had been debunked before they shared the story multiple times, and now the woman responsible for the original Facebook post that started that lie has admitted there never was any truth to her story. Erica Lee from Springfield, Ohio, told NBC News, "It just exploded into something I didn't mean to happen." The tongue is a fire, but the damage has been done. You can't take it back. Reuters News is reporting that fear-filled Haitian parents are now keeping their children home from school because their children have been subjected to bullying and assault and intimidation amid racist rhetoric amplified by social media. David Dark, professor of religion at Belmont University, says, "We become what we normalize, and we must not allow this sort of talk to be normalized." I'm afraid Dr. Dark is too late. But he says this is not a partisan discussion. It is a fundamental human discussion. And Russell Moore, the deeply conservative leader in evangelical Christianity, the editor of the conservative magazine Christianity Today, Russell Moore says, "When we are willing to see children terrorized, rather than stop telling lies about their families, we should step back, forget about our dogs and cats for a moment, and ask who abducted our consciences." The tongue is a fire, a restless evil. The church left and right, Christian people, Republican and Democrat and Libertarian and Independent, have to say to any leaders who spread such dangerous, demonizing rhetoric, this is not acceptable. We will not stand for this. Such intentional slander is dangerous and it must stop. The integrity of the Christian church is at stake, and the moral character of the nation. The tongue is a fire, and the forest is ablaze with the curse of words that has been unleashed on the nation, from the halls of power to keyboards in homes and offices all across the country. Amy and I lived in Yellowstone National Park the year after the fires of 1988 burned a record number of acres. It was the most devastating forest fire Yellowstone had ever seen. Those who lived through that fire circulated a joke. How do you stop a forest fire, they would ask? The answer is you pour money on it until it rains. So much for fighting fire with fire. Sometimes the climate just has to change. Let us pray that a storm cloud of more compassionate leaders, of cooler heads, of kinder tongues brings some quenching rain to a nation on fire. And let us be part of that life-giving rain. We cannot control the words of the former president, of the current president, of any future president, but we can do our part. As people of faith, we can begin to control the forest fire of the World Wide Web by vowing to be a part only of a solution and not a contributor to the problem. We can vow to be more aware of the curse of words, especially in this cultural climate. And we should commit, beginning today, to use words, whether spoken or written or forwarded on the internet, to bless God, not to curse any who are made in the likeness of God. May it be so. Amen.